A home breaker, they called her a home breaker. But Sophia never saw herself that way. At 29, Sophia had built a remarkable career as an interior designer. Her name was featured in glossy magazines, her work praised for its elegance and charm. People admired her ability to transform dull houses into dream homes. Every client who walked into a newly designed space by her felt a sense of renewal, as if the house itself had been reborn. Yet behind her success, there was an uncomfortable truth, one that followed her like a shadow. Sophia didn't just redesign homes. She changed the lives inside them. The first home, the Andersons, it started with the Andersons, one of her first high-profile clients. They lived in a mansion that looked like something out of a movie, grand, perfect, yet lifeless. The house had tall glass windows, expensive furniture, and spotless marble floors, but it felt cold. Mrs. Anderson was in her mid-40s, elegant, graceful, but lonely. She wanted warmth in her home. She spoke of soft lighting, deep colors, and cozy corners. Mr. Anderson, a busy businessman, had no interest in decor. His world was white walls, gray furniture, and silence. Sophia observed their interactions. At dinner meetings, Mr. Anderson barely looked at his wife. During design discussions, he responded with one-word answers. When Mrs. Anderson spoke about her ideas, her husband dismissed them. Sophia saw it, the emptiness, the distance, the loneliness hidden beneath luxury. One evening, as they finalized details, Mrs. Anderson sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. "I don't think he loves me anymore," she admitted softly. Sophia didn't say much. She just listened. 3 months later, Mr. Anderson moved out. Sophia completed the redesign, adding warmth, life, and color, but only for one person. The house was no longer a mansion. It was a home. Mrs. Anderson smiled more, walked lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. The whispers began soon after. She interfered. She encouraged the breakup. Sophia ignored them. She wasn't responsible for what had already been broken, or was she? The second home, the Carters, her next project was different. Mark and Emma Carter were a young couple, newly married, filled with energy. Their home was small but filled with love. Emma was the kind of woman who found joy in decorating, carefully choosing color palettes, obsessing over furniture choices. Mark, practical and logical, was less interested. He loved Emma, but had little patience for home decor. Sophia enjoyed working on this project. Emma was warm, full of ideas, excited about every detail. Sophia admired her enthusiasm and the way she adored her husband. But then, something changed. Mark started getting involved, not in a way husbands usually did. He texted Sophia at odd hours, asking for opinions on things unrelated to the project. He started staying home during consultations, offering her coffee, laughing at her jokes. At first, she thought it was harmless, until the night she received a message from him. "I think about you more than I should." Sophia froze. She knew where this could lead. She had seen broken homes before, but this time, she was inside one. When the cracks appeared, she deleted the message. The next day, she avoided him. But Emma noticed the change. She saw how Sophia hesitated before answering, how Mark glanced at Sophia when he thought Emma wasn't looking. 2 weeks later, the Carters canceled the project. A month later, they separated. "She's a home breaker," people whispered. Sophia told herself it wasn't her fault, but deep down, something didn't feel right. The pattern, a trail of broken homes, the pattern followed her, haunting her like a ghost. Every home she entered seemed perfect from the outside, but was already fractured within. Every family she worked with had unspoken resentments, silent struggles, love that had quietly faded. Sophia never encouraged breakups. She never told wives to leave their husbands or husbands to betray their wives. Yet, when she walked away from a project, things had changed. She was a designer, a creator, not a destroyer, right? One evening, after completing another redesign, she sat alone in her apartment. The whispers had grown louder, harder to ignore. She looked at her own life. An empty home. No one waiting for her. No real relationships. Was she really a home breaker? Or was she just the final push that exposed what people refused to see? The final home, Sophia's own. Months passed. Sophia worked on new projects, but she was more careful now. She set strict boundaries, refused late-night messages, and kept her distance. Then, one day, she received an unexpected call. It was Mrs. Anderson. She wanted to meet. Curious, Sophia agreed. They met at a quiet cafe. Mrs. Anderson looked different, happier, free. She smiled warmly as she spoke. "I never thanked you properly, Sophia." Sophia blinked. "For what?" "For helping me see what I refused to accept." She stirred her tea, her voice calm. "You didn't break my home. It was already broken. You just made me realize I deserved more." Sophia's chest tightened. She had spent months questioning herself, blaming herself. But now, here was Mrs. Anderson, sitting across from her, saying she had done something good. "I was so scared to leave," Mrs. Anderson continued. "I told myself it was just a phase, that things would get better. But when I saw my own home being redesigned, I realized how much of my life had become lifeless too." "You didn't tell me to leave, Sophia. You just showed me what happiness could look like again." Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat. Maybe she wasn't a home breaker. Maybe she was just the one who turned the lights on in dark, broken places. But the guilt didn't vanish so easily. A week later, Sophia received another message. this time from Emma Carter.
Can we meet? Please. It's important. Sophia hesitated. The last time she had seen Emma was the day she canceled the project. Would she accuse her? Blame her for everything? Still, something inside her told her to go. They met at a quiet park, away from the city's noise. Emma looked different. Not as bright as before, but not angry either. I wanted to talk to you, Emma said. Because I think you deserve to know the truth. Sophia nodded, bracing herself. Mark and we had problems long before you came along, Emma admitted. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. He stopped looking at me like I was the most important person in his life. And I guess I was holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. Sophia let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. I don't blame you, Emma said softly. I don't think you ever meant to come between us. But maybe your presence made me see what I didn't want to admit. Sophia's hands tightened around the coffee cup. She had spent months believing she was the problem. But was it possible that she wasn't breaking homes, she was just showing people what was already falling apart? That night, she sat alone in her apartment, looking around at the carefully designed space she had created for herself. Everything was perfect. Yet, it felt empty. She had spent years fixing other people's homes, bringing warmth into their lives. But she had never built a home for herself, and that was the real tragedy. For the first time in a long time, Sophia allowed herself to cry, not for the home she had changed, not for the whispers that followed her, but for the life she had neglected.
The final decision. The next morning, Sophia made a decision. She would take a break, not from designing, but from walking into homes that weren't hers. She would travel, learn about herself, build a life outside of work. She had spent so much time helping others see what they truly needed. Now, it was time to do the same for herself. As she packed her bags, she glanced at her reflection in the mirror. She wasn't a home breaker, she was a truth revealer. And for the first time, she was ready to face her own truth. The end. Thank you for listening to this story.